police detective named Romov annoys a fortune teller, so she curses him and says that he'll regret his actions later that day. A few hours later, Romov gets shot during an undercover mission, but luckily he's taken to the hospital quickly. After he passes out, though, he suddenly wakes up and sees that he's now in the body of a toddler. A few days earlier, Romov completes his stay as an undercover agent in a federal prison, so a lady named Katya comes over to get him to sign some documents for his release. As they start talking, Katya doesn't seem to know that he's a cop, so she wonders why Romov had several problems in prison despite having a clean record before his arrest. She then asks why he wants to be a crime boss, and he says he just feels he was born for it. Katya senses this as a case of Romov not cooperating with her, but as she's about to lecture him, he says he doesn't need her advice. He also goes on to correctly profile her as a lady who had a promising future until she met a loser and got married to him.
Intuiция.
Katya is shocked and disappointed by how Romov speaks of her husband, but this doesn't stop him from adding that she needs to dump her husband because he's not good enough for her. Katya doesn't like this idea because she's currently pregnant, but Romov tells her that she can always take care of the baby alone. He even mentions that she can consider taking the baby to an orphanage. Katya seems disgusted by this idea, but Romov adds that orphanages aren't so bad because he also grew up in one. Since their conversation is already annoying her, Katya just signs his release form and tells him that she won't leave her husband. Elsewhere, an environmental police officer named Oleg runs through the city to chase down a boy he just caught stepping into a flower bed and destroying some flowers. During the chase, Oleg calls his office for backup, but his colleague who answers the phone doesn't think there's anything worth sending backup for, especially considering the nature of their job. Despite this, Oleg still continues running until he finds the boy among some other children in the area. As Oleg then tries to inform the boy of his crime, his friends laugh at him. One of them even cuts another flower to provoke Oleg, but before he can do anything, a boy who seems to be the leader of the group threatens to hurt him. Oleg still says he'll have to write a report about what the boys did, but just then he receives a call from his wife, who turns out to be Katya. Oleg looks quite happy as he answers the phone, and he immediately asks if Katya is already in labor so he can run to meet her. However, Katya says she only felt like speaking to him. She also asks if he loves her, and he says he does. After a while, Romov leaves the prison and heads to meet some of his fellow agents who are prepared for another mission. Elsewhere, one of the boys in the city's market sees a strange yellow bus in the area, so he goes to check what's inside. Interestingly, the bus turns out to be loaded with police agents who are around for a mission. However, the boy is unable to see them because the windows are tinted. He eventually tries to break into the bus, but his knife breaks into the keyhole. And since he can no longer open the door, he just walks away. Just then, the leader of the officers inside the bus, Lyusia, informs her team that it's almost time for them to head out to catch a crime boss named the Dragon. She adds that one of their agents will first initiate contact with the crime boss before they engage. Shortly after, Romov arrives at the market and immediately goes into the shop of a fortune teller
Клиент на месте.
to take some important things he'll need before he goes to meet the Dragon as an undercover agent. While inside the shop, the fortune teller tells Romov that he shouldn't have insulted Katya the way he did, and this leaves him shocked as he wonders how she knew about it. As he then tries to brush off the subject, the woman repeats that he shouldn't have made fun of Katya because she was quite open with him. Romov says he doesn't care about it, and this gets the fortune teller angry to the extent that she says he'll pay for what he did later that day. Romov doesn't seem moved by this,
Ты давай это проветри здесь.
but she says that he'll crawl back to her for help after a year. Romov eventually leaves her shop and heads over to the parking lot where the Dragon's car is parked. Meanwhile, Oleg and Katya are also at the market, buying some things for their unborn baby. As they start talking about the baby, Oleg says he'd like their child to also be a cop like him, and Katya says it's a good idea. She adds that she likes Oleg's job because he won't have to come up against gangs and bad guys. Just as she hugs him and calls him her hero, Oleg sees that the Dragon's car actually crossed the lawn before parking in the lot. As he sees Romov entering the car, Oleg immediately tells his wife to excuse him because he has a job to do. Meanwhile, the Dragon looks suspicious of Romov, but after the detective says he's harmless, The crime boss shows him some of the drugs he's selling. Just as Romov rejects trying them out, Oleg comes near the car and knocks on the window. The dragon and his assistant immediately look worried, so the driver brings out his gun. However, Romov tells them to remain calm while he handles the cop. Just then, he opens the window, and Oleg tells him about the damaged flowers on the lawn. Romov says they didn't see it when they parked, but Oleg still insists that what they did was wrong. As Lyusia tells Romov through his comms that Oleg is not a part of the operation, he finally decides to come down from the car to quickly convince the cop to leave before he gets caught up in the bust. Despite Romov's attempts to make Oleg drop the case, he refuses to do so, and this starts to make the dragon's driver nervous. After a while, though, Romov manages to convince Oleg that he'll do better for the environment, so the cop then decides to drop the case. Before he leaves, the lady inside the car throws out a nylon wrap. And as Oleg gets pissed by this, he forgets about his initial deal with Romov and decides to call his office for backup again. The dragon's driver misinterprets this, so he opens the window and shoots at Oleg, but Romov stands in the way of the bullets. He gets shot instead, and as he starts bleeding, the dragon leaves the scene. Lyusia and her team then try to leave the bus to help Romov, but they find out that the door's keyhole has been jammed, so they're unable to head out. While Oleg is wondering what to do, Katya walks over to inform him that her water just broke. Since he now has to deal with his pregnant wife and the bleeding man, Oleg quickly locates his car and drives to the hospital to get them help. While this is happening, the fortune teller starts arranging some tarot cards, which are meant to dictate what will happen to Romov, who's being treated in the same hospital as Katya. After a while, Katya gives birth to a baby boy named Vanya, and as Oleg hears the baby's cries, he looks really excited to be a father. A year later, Oleg and Katya's baby grows older, but they're unaware that Romov's spirit is actually inside the baby. Despite the love displayed by Oleg and Katya toward him, Romov seems to be quite disgusted because he has been stuck in a baby's body for over a year. He also refuses to say anything, but his parents don't see this as a problem because he's still very young. One day, while the family is at home, Oleg plays with the baby and talks about how he's a wonderful cop. As he then tells the baby to repeat what he just said, Romov speaks for the first time and calls Oleg a loser. Oleg is shocked by this, and he even passes out before Katya comes over to revive him. As she asks what happened, he tells her that their baby can now talk, but Romov only waves at them. Later that night, Oleg still can't help but think about what the baby said earlier. As he keeps watching the baby, because he's now scared of him, Oleg suddenly hears Romov calling him. Oleg cannot believe this, but as he goes close to the baby, he's again shocked to hear Romov telling him not to shout so that Katya won't wake up. Despite this, Katya wakes up, but Oleg quickly tells her to go back to bed. He then takes the baby into the bathroom, and there, Romov explains that he suddenly found himself inside a baby's body after he almost died a year ago. Oleg is confused by this, but as he asks what they should do, Romov says he knows who to meet. Just then,
Но знаю, где можно поинтересоваться.
Oleg takes Romov to the fortune teller's place. As the woman sees him, she gloats about how she said he'd come back to her a year ago. However, Romov doesn't seem interested in this because he just wants to reverse what happened. Suddenly, the fortune teller goes into a trance, but she still tells Romov that he'll be able to reverse the situation by going to the cave of the dragon and holding the little finger of his worst enemy. Romov doesn't really understand what she means, but she doesn't give any more details. Just then, Oleg asks where he can find his real baby, so the woman directs him to a hospital where the baby's spirit is inside Romov's body. Oleg is shocked to see his child like that, but he still tries to play with the baby and bond with him despite Romov's protests. Later that day, Romov then suggests following the fortune teller's instructions by finding the dragon's cave. Since Lyusia has been working on the case for a long time, Romov tells Oleg to meet with her to find out whatever she knows. However, when Oleg meets Lyusia, she remembers him as the one who botched the operation, so she refuses to tell him anything. She also hurts his shoulder and dismisses him, while looking angry that she nearly lost a partner who has still not recovered. Oleg and Romov are disappointed by this, But when they return home, they come up with another plan to find the lady who was inside the dragon's car the other day. Since she likely has an idea where the dragon regularly meets up with his associates, Oleg and Romov head to the club where she works. While Romov remains inside the baby walker outside the club, Oleg goes in alone, though they still keep communicating through a walkie-talkie. Shortly after, Oleg gets the lady's attention, but when they're alone, he mistakenly knocks her out. As he now looks nervous and wonders what to do, Romov tells him to bring her outside so they can take her elsewhere and get the information they need. Oleg is still scared because he doesn't want any trouble, but as he's about to do as Romov suggested, he gets a call from Katya, who asks where he went that late in the night with their child. Oleg says he just went for a night walk with the baby, and Katya sounds happy to hear this. However, before she can say anything else, Oleg quickly ends the call. He then takes the unconscious lady out of the club. Later that night, when the lady wakes up, Oleg and Romov blindfold her and pretend to be one of the dragon's associates. This gets the lady scared, and after a while of questioning, she finally reveals where she was expected to meet with the dragon, who is on a boat. She also gives them a special code word that will get them on the boat. Following this, Oleg and Romov abandon her at the scene and head home. While Oleg and Romov are then plotting how they'll go to the boat, Katya enters the bathroom and mentions that it's good to see her husband and child bonding well. As she leaves, Romov tells Oleg that before they meet the dragon, he'll need to learn how to look and behave like a tough guy. Oleg agrees to learn, so later that night, Romov starts teaching him a few things before he falls asleep. The next morning, they then head to a store to buy the suits they'll be wearing to the meeting with the dragon. On their way home, Oleg says they need to hurry because Katya will already be waiting for them. Romov then says that he has noticed how Oleg doesn't really show his love for Katya. Oleg is shocked to hear this, but he asks if Romov did better during his relationship with Lyusia. Romov is surprised to learn that Oleg knows about his relationship, but he mentions that he suspected it when they went to see her the other day. Romov then mentions that he tried his best to love her, but he eventually left her on the day of their marriage. Oleg cannot believe he'd do something like that, but Romov mentions that he just couldn't see himself being a family man.
На свадьбу.
Shortly after, he then teaches Oleg to pick some flowers for his wife. Oleg does as he's told, and when he gives them to Katya, she appreciates it. The next day, Oleg and Romov head to the dragon's boat to begin their mission. As they get there, they use the code word and are allowed in. Since the plan is now to call Lyusia to send her team to bust the dragon and his associates, Oleg brings out his phone, but one of the dragon's guards takes it from him because phones are not allowed at the meeting. Following this, Oleg and Romov head to the table where the dragon and his associates are sitting. As Oleg takes his seat, Romov tells him to distract everyone while he tries to get his phone and some weapons, which they can use if things go south. While Romov is then crawling under the table, Oleg stylishly steals some wraps of candy and starts talking to the men about how he's a bad guy who deals drugs in one of the dragon's territories. Unfortunately, some of the men at the table don't believe him. And as he keeps saying random things, the dragon starts to suspect that there's something off about him. After a while, Oleg eventually gets the men in the room to turn against each other, and as they fight, the dragon gets his assistant to wheel him away. Oleg then sees Romov hiding under the dragon's wheelchair, so he decides to follow him. Before he goes too far, the dragon tells his guards to take down Oleg while he leaves by himself. The guards then quickly use a taser to weaken him, but as he sees them stepping on a flower, this makes him angry, and he suddenly gains the strength to face them. Meanwhile, Romov finally stands up to the dragon with a gun, but before he can shoot, the man tells him that he's innocent. Elsewhere, Oleg beats up the guards, and after a while, he sees Romov complaining that everything he did was for nothing. Oleg doesn't understand this since they can already catch the dragon, but the man says he's not actually a crime boss, and that he's a paid actor named Moonzy. As they leave the boat, Moonzy then tells them that he was paid by an anonymous person to take on the role of the dragon. Romov believes that the real dragon used Moonzi as a decoy, but this still leaves him worried because he could now spend the rest of his life as a baby. Shortly after, the cops raid the boat to arrest all the criminals inside. Lyusia then arrives at the scene and asks if anyone has seen the dragon, but as she learns that he's nowhere to be found, she looks scared. Elsewhere, Oleg gets a call from Katya, so he leaves Romov and Moonzi to take the call. While he's then away, Moonzi says sorry to Romov for making him waste his time, and he also promises to help him in any way he can. However, Romov is still quite confused as to how Moonzi managed to communicate with the person who gave him the gig. Just then, Moonzi shows Romov the phone he was given, as well as the scripts he was told to follow. He adds that he was also given some drugs, which he kept in candy wraps. As he says this, Oleg unknowingly eats one of the sweets he stole on the boat. By the time Moonzi and Romov realize this, it's already too late, and Oleg gets high and starts doing weird things, which eventually sees the baby getting chased by one of the animals in the zoo. When Oleg comes back to his senses, he quickly helps Romov. But the cops end up chasing them away from the zoo for wrongly entering an animal's territory. Shortly after, while they're seated at the zoo's exit, Oleg says sorry to Romov and mentions that he was really scared he was going to lose the detective. Romov then tells him not to be worried and that he's happy they're now friends. He also says that Oleg is his partner, and after they hug, Katya arrives at the zoo. Immediately, she sees them. Katya looks happy and asks Oleg about the rumor she heard regarding how he threw their baby over a fence and into an animal's cage. Oleg confesses what he did, though he adds that he didn't mean to do it. However, Katya just takes their baby and tells him to stay back. Oleg then tries to tell her that their baby is someone else, but she doesn't listen to him. Oleg is disappointed by this, so he heads to the hospital to stay with Romov's body. While he's there, he gets an idea to find the real dragon, so he goes to secretly pick Romov from the house. On their way to where he expects to meet the dragon, Romov asks how he found the crime boss, and Oleg says that he has sent their coordinates to the anonymous contact on Moonzi's phone. As Romov says it's a reckless plan, they suddenly get hit by a speeding vehicle. When Oleg wakes up, he sees himself tied to a chair with Romov sitting in front of him. As he says, he now knows that his plan was reckless. Oleg sees Lyusia coming toward them, and he rejoices because he believes she'll save them. However, she confirms that she's actually the one who invented the story of the dragon. She adds that she paid Moonzi to play the role, and that everything she did was to make Romov pay dearly for leaving her at the registry on the day of their wedding. As she then sees the baby, she says he looks quite cute like Romov, and that it's so funny that even though they nearly got married, she's now his enemy. Oleg immediately signals to Romov to touch her hand to reverse the fortune teller's curse, but as Lyusia says that Romov's worst enemy is himself, he realizes that touching her hand won't work. Before he can say anything, Lyusia shoots herself in the leg and threatens Oleg to take the gun from her so that it would look like he shot her. Oleg has no choice but to take the gun, but as he does so, some other cops enter the building, and Lyusia calls him the Dragon. Oleg tries to clear his name, but as no one is listening to him, Romov comes up with another plan. Following this, Oleg picks up the baby and threatens to kill him if the cops don't move away. This plan works, and Oleg is finally able to leave with Romov. They then head to the hospital together. And as Oleg tells Romov that he's his own worst enemy, he realizes that he'll actually have to touch his own body. As he then meets with Oleg's real baby, Romov touches his body, but it doesn't work. This makes him sad, and he tells Romov that he's sorry for messing with his family, like he always does when he's about to build his own family. Just then, the baby lifts his little finger. And as Oleg realizes that Romov needs to actually hold the finger, the detective quickly does this. Almost immediately, the cops break into the room and arrest Oleg. After he's taken away, Lyusia arrives at the hospital to kill Romov, even though she's unaware that his spirit is inside the baby. Just as she laments about how he treated her, Romov says he's sorry.
Высокочувствительный микрофон.
Lyusia is shocked by this because she knows he hasn't said a word in over a year. However, Romov appears to have regained his body, and he tells her that he already has a recording of everything she said, including her confession of how she planned the fake dragon bust that almost killed him. As she looks confused, Romov calls Moonsey to enter the room, and Liusia realizes that they actually teamed up to take her down. Following this, Liusia looks disappointed because she knows she has nowhere to run to. A few days later, while Katya and Oleg are celebrating little Vanya's birthday, Romov brings them flowers, and he also gets to play with the baby. After a while, he then tells Oleg about a mission he wants them to work on together. Oleg is happy about this, and since this will allow him to get involved in some action, he agrees to help Romov as his new partner.